right, welcome on the show, Dr. David. Thank you so much for coming on.
G'day, Jody. Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure.
I've been very excited to chat to you today. We met in person and I send so many clients to you, and I love what you do in all aspects of helping people. But one of the fascinating things about your practice is cannabis. So we are here today to, well, focus on cannabis, but also whatever we end up talking about, which can be many things. I'm gonna think. So for me, first of all, what brought you to cannabis and treating people with cannabis?
Great question. I always start with a disclaimer, Jody. I always say when I do any podcasts or any speaking that the information is for general information purposes only. And if you're someone at home listening to this, one of your audience, evaluate if the information is relevant to you, discuss it with your health professionals. Don't just listen to some guy on a podcast and then go out and do something drastic, So that's my little thing. To answer your question, it was a bit kind of unexpected and fortuitous moving into cannabis. Like, I didn't have any intentions of going into that. I was orthodox trained through, one of the West Australian medical schools and in the health system for probably like 8, 9, close to 10 years, working through the tertiary hospitals and then moving into general practice. And I suppose there was a bit of an uneasiness in me personally, moving through medicine generally and in general practice. There were a lot of things that didn't resonate with me, or I felt like my hands were tied in many ways, or the system didn't support the kind of thinking that I wanted to apply. So I was kind of already in a space of feeling a little bit divergent from some of the major teachings. And then I eventually left general practice. I was a trainee and was basically looking for a job. And I was like, what do I want to do now? I know I'm interested in holistic health and well-being or alternative and complementary medicine alongside orthodox medicine. And it just kind of fell into my lap. And I suppose I had a lot of the standard ideas about cannabis before I went into it. I didn't know a lot, granted, but I was pretty ignorant to the therapeutics of it, and I'd probably been a little bit brainwashed in some respects from the standard mainstream messaging about cannabis.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I love that there's an open-mindedness, and more people are coming towards cannabis, which is also amazing. And I think the development of it, which I want to talk about with you at the end, is that it is moving in the right direction, I feel. However, let's set the context for the audience, because some people still have no idea what we mean by cannabis, and then obviously cannabis treatment as a medicine. So, what is cannabis? What is, how does it fit within the endocannabinoid system, and maybe a brief understanding of that, and then maybe looking through some of the aspects of entourage effect or terpenes, and then the different cannabinoids. So maybe just as brief as we can so we can get into
it. As brief as possible. We have a plant that grows in the ground, and it's been labelled with lots of names, kind of falsely, marijuana and lots of other things, but the true name of this plant is cannabis, and is a few different kinds of strains which people will have heard of, indica, sativa. Basically, we have a plant that grows in the ground, and within it, it has a myriad of molecules that have some degree of therapeutic effect, which is still being elucidated. But imagine a plant that has many, many molecules in it. We're talking about things like cannabinoids. So people have heard about THC and CBD, probably the major cannabinoids. Then there's a whole host of what we are calling for now minor cannabinoids, and people might be familiar with the letters CB and pretty much any letter of the alphabet after that. CBC, CBG, CBN, CBDVA, THC, there's many different minor cannabinoids, which are believed to have therapeutic role as well, which continues to be expanding. You rightly touched on terpenes, which are the aromatic essences in plants. An example of this would be when you smell lavender, you're smelling something called linalool, which is the terpene or one of the terpenes that exists in lavender. the terpenes have a therapeutic role. There's flavonoids within the plant as well. So we're really talking about a whole plant medicine. And then probably since about the 90s, scientists have been aware of receptors in our body, which we're calling cannabinoid receptors, and more largely something called the endocannabinoid system, which endo meaning endogenous or within the body, cannabinoid pertaining to the plant and the receptors, and then it's a system. So we have, imagine something like your nervous system, your endocrine system, which people are familiar with, cardiovascular system. The endocannabinoid system is its own system in our body, and we make our own endogenous cannabinoids, our own cannabinoids within our body, and your audience may be familiar with a couple, one called anandamide, or the bliss molecule is kind of affectionately known as, another one called 2-AG, a very long name, 2-arachidoyl glycerol. These two cannabinoids that we naturally make in our body, they're signaling molecules, so they're involved in how the brain works, how neurons communicate, cell signaling and messaging. And then we know that THC and CBD and various other cannabinoids from the plant, exogenous cannabinoids from outside of our body, they bind to these receptors that we have. And just quickly, there's CB1 receptor and CB2 receptor, and we know that the molecules can bind to that and exert an effect depending on which part of the body that they bind or which part of the central nervous system that they're binding to. Is that a good snapshot quickly?
That was great. That was great. And I think we'll dive into different components of that as I ask more questions of you. But first, I want to capture from you, what is the most exciting part that you find about cannabis medicine in general? You know, like, as an example, I have, some certain things that really drive me with my naturopathic medicine. I'm like, oh my God, I really love this part, or I'm really looking at this test, or I really like this component and excites me about these different herbs. What do you love about cannabis?
The main thing is just its efficacy for a broad range of things. And I don't want to kind of besmirch anything within Western medicine, but everything has its limitations. And since moving into medicinal cannabis and working with it, it really works for a lot of things. And I know that the TGA and the health department have ideas about some of the things that there's a lot of robust evidence for. Other things they say there's inadequate evidence to be using, or there's not sufficient evidence to prove that these things work for these conditions. But I've seen cannabis, both CBD and THC, work for so many things. And people come back and they say, this has changed my life. And they're not stoners. They're not, they're not drug takers or bad people. They're, 50-year-old, middle-aged women. They're, someone in their 80s. They're a whole plethora of different people with different conditions, but they come back and say, I've been laboring with this problem for 10, 20, 30 years. Nothing's worked. I started this, it really works. So to see, I guess, the results and to see people come back and say this has been an absolute game changer. Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think, but mentioning it, to people is sometimes a bit of an effort, to try and actually, I'll have multiple conversations with people in my office right here. And we're like, I think you should go see Dr. David. Oh, why do you think? I'm like, I think you might need some cannabis. I think we might need to try some THC or some CBD and go, discuss what you might need. They're like, oh, no, I can't have that. That's cannabis. I'm like, yeah, exactly the point. Yeah, exactly. Through all of my knowledge of like, well, it works with this and that will help with that, and that's the research for this. And yeah, so it fascinates me how little people know, and to the benefit of, but more than likely or not, that there's limited side effects compared to what they may already be taking or have taken in the past. So that leads me to my next question on, what are you seeing a lot of, if there is anything that is a common thread across conditions that you see? And are you seeing more of certain conditions come through in the practice in the last, few years, or since you have been in practice?
It's probably similar to your practice. Like the spectrum is very wide. you can't get away from mental health, and it's a massive reason that brings people to cannabis. And, you know, on the face value, people might be like, oh, what can cannabis do for depression, or what can cannabis possibly do for anxiety or post-traumatic stress disorder, or, you know, obsessive compulsive disorder, or whatever it may be, ADHD. Mental health is enormous. It's so overrepresented, and particularly in young people, people with multiple diagnoses. So mental health is a big one. Chronic pain, you know, would have to be one of the other most enormous ones. And I don't think I've met anybody, a handful of people out of thousands of patients, that sleeps well. I just don't know. Like, these things, they're comorbid, they travel together. People come and they say, I've got pain, and obviously my sleep's crap because of that, and then because of that, I've got anxiety around sleep, I've got anxiety the next day. So there's enormous crossover, as you know, these things, they travel together.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, mental health has been on the rise, I think, significantly since, you know, we shall name, you know, the lockdowns and things like that. I feel people are a little bit more on edge. So, you know, it's something in practice, I guess, you will see a development of in different areas. But so when you have people come to see you, what determines the fact that you go, right, this person is going to require cannabis or something else? You know, is there a guidance that you go by to go, well, this is better treated with cannabis? Or is it just an intuition? You know, I'm trying, yeah, it's hard to gauge sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if I've interpreted the question. Do you mean as far as like contraindications, or who to screen out, or?
I guess a lot of people are coming to you for cannabis because of the company that you're a part of, and obviously the things that you're doing. But is there, you know, yes, contraindications, but also, you know, who would be best treated with cannabis? And is there always that one? Or is it try with this person and let's just see what happens?
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, there are some things that are notoriously hard to treat in medicine. And one of those that comes to mind is neuropathic pain. You know, it can be amenable to cannabis and various other things as well, you know, non-cannabinoid medicines and a whole host of things. But I often caveat people with neuropathic pain and say, look, this may or may not work. And I say that to everybody, like CBD and THC can be really helpful for lots of things for lots of people. Some people they just don't work for. So I like to set people's expectations as well and say, look, it may not work for you at all. Everyone's idiosyncratic and very individualized. There's a kind of cohort of people that I will try and avoid cannabis in, and they're probably all of the things that you would imagine. History of psychosis, sometimes, you know, bipolar disorder, or, you know, mania and depression, where there's, you know, concerns about risk and safety and, you know, the potential for mind-altering substance, you know, pregnant, breastfeeding, unstable cardiovascular disease. There's various things that and the reason for the unstable cardiovascular disease is the potential for tachycardia with THC can increase your heart a bit, which if someone's got, you know, a really bad heart full of stents and they've got unstable angina, and we don't want to put anything that's going to increase their heart rate. So there are things where I go, that's a concern, or that person's on blood thinners and is now going to be taking CBD. But a lot of it's trial and error and finding out what a person's preferences are. I don't want to make it sound as though cannabis medicine is without its risks. They are both very safe molecules, but they need to be done cleverly, judiciously, and then having to think about, you know, various things. Driving is one big topic all of its own in relation to THC. Patient preference, you know, some people come and they say, I'm absolutely dead against THC or any of that drug stuff. Just give me CBD, or, you know, so there's lots of factors that come into it. And there's a way to mitigate risk, and it's a lot of education, Jody, like it really is, going through and getting the person to understand what are they going to be in for, and are they willing to take that on. I think we're pretty notorious as doctors, some of us, to be pretty crappy at counselling people on potential side effects, or, you know, you're starting this might mean that you're on this for the next 6 months or the next 12 months or the next 5 years. I don't think we educate and counsel people very well at times. So I try to make that a big part of my practice. If somebody leaves my office not knowing how to take the medicine or the side effects, or I haven't done my job. I haven't done my job if that person can't make an informed decision.
I agree. And that education is going to empower them to actually make those good changes, and more broadly than even just taking the medicine. And we can get into that in a little bit, which I also want to ask you about. But so for the specific nature of prescribing cannabis, there is a huge variety of availability of what we have in Australia, talking specifically for Australia, because it's very different in each country. But also, I'm not sure, do we have availability of other CBN and CBC compounds? And then how, is there anything you can guide us with, what you may use certain ratios for, or, what is the availability?
Yeah, so it's expanding. We are definitely a different market to the United States, and we get a lot of comparisons to, I've been in Canada, I've been in the US, I've been in Thailand, and so on and so forth. Things are expanding here, but predominantly we are working with THC and CBD in a sort of broad general sense, and that's what most people are familiar with. The minor cannabinoids are becoming more popular. We're starting to see preparations, and keep in mind we have things like flour for people to inhale. There are oils for people to orally ingest. There are kind of an expanding gummy market, wafers, topical balms. There's endometriosis related vaginal creams and pessaries, and there's a whole host of delivery mechanisms, and they're kind of starting to expand as well into the minor cannabinoids. So there are products that are now half CBD, half CBG. There are typically oils, more so. So yeah, it's expanding. I don't think there's that much knowledge around it yet, and I don't claim to be an expert in the minor cannabinoids. I think they are something that people are delving into. There is a amazing American woman called Bonnie Goldstein, who is a fantastic cannabis doctor, prescriber, and she, to my knowledge, is one of the experts in a lot of the minor cannabinoids. I know that she delves into different isolate compounds and a whole host of things. It's probably just tip of the iceberg here for us, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that too. When I made my trip over to the US last year, I tried a few different cannabinoid compounds, and CBG knocked me out completely. It's just, made me very, very, very sleepy. Some of these things make you make me so amazed at the power of these individual cannabinoids and the minor cannabinoids. And there's a lot of excitement to come, in the space, particularly here. And then more research obviously equals more availability, and then safety measures around those as well. But the space over in America is very different. Walking down and there's just New York Main Street. It's different. I even walked into a cafe serving mocktails and herbs, and they had a big volcano. So everyone was getting the benefits of all the cannabinoids in the air.
Wow.
So very, very different space over there.
I think the aficionados in Perth or anywhere are really looking at minor cannabinoids and terpenoids. There's a lot of interest in what does each terpene do, and there's companies that produce just terpene blends which have no CBD, no THC. It's a little tincture, and you can take one that's predominantly alpha and beta pinene and limonene, and it's uplifting. So it has an uplifting effect. There are products that are, again, no THC, no CBD, but are heavy in myrcene, beta-caryophyllene, linalool, some of the more sedating things, which will be more relaxing. So I think there's a lot of nuance and stuff going on.
Absolutely. And for me, when I look at clients here and I have to, almost screen them to be referring them out, I'm looking at, as you said, sleep conditions, pain, associations, anywhere, like you said, endometriosis, or even shoulder pains for the creams and things like that. Obviously, anxiety is massive, but also anti-inflammatory conditions, which is so many these days. Like any anti-inflammatory support needed can be had through cannabinoids. So, I find that power in that is incredible.
Yeah, a lot of people moving for cannabis for anti-inflammatory purposes. Yeah, absolutely. I've seen some bizarre things, and I know they're just anecdotes, but I've had, I remember one guy, he'd had a benign essential tremor basically his whole life, and his hand just used to move. And he came in with bursitis, chronic sort of shoulder pain. I think we started CBD only, and then he came back several months later and he says, somewhat, hasn't fixed it, but also my benign essential tremor, which I've had since I was 5 years old, has gone. And I was like, it's interesting. I've had people with anosmia, loss of smell and taste, or burning mouth syndrome, strange things that people come back after using CBD that have got better. Autoimmune conditions, skin conditions. I've had a few people with autism, particularly some kids. I had one kid that had was non-verbal when we started CBD, and the child started talking, and I was just like, I don't know if it's the CBD, but it's a very dramatic effect. There's probably no literature to support that, but it's an interesting anecdote, and the parents are, blown away.
But even, with, what am I thinking of? So with children, there's a massive research study when you have not the tremors, it's gone out of my head. Because it's the major one that they've been researching. They found that
epilepsy.
Gosh, I'm thinking. Epilepsy is huge in the research, and that's when I was doing my research. I was blown away by the output of what they've put into discovering all these different, inputs for children. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think epilepsy is one of the areas that's probably the best researched as far as cannabis. And I think a fair amount of that's been driven by children with intractable seizures, Dravet syndrome, and rare conditions where they're having hundreds of seizures a day and the quality of life is really bad. Maybe trialed multiple anti-epileptic medications that have failed, and then they've been started on, CBD or even THC for some kids, and it's drastically changed their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And parents really wouldn't always think about going towards that, because they think they're drugging their children. It's one of those really odd topics to go down, but now it's becoming a lot more accepted, obviously, and dose is key.
Dose is key.
Yeah, dose is key. So onto that, titration, dosing, it's important. When I did my research, and so I became familiar with it, is that the dosing of cannabis is very different to any other pharmaceutical. So, what are some, I guess, key points for people to know about how to dose cannabis, or what they might expect?
Yeah, for sure. Maybe starting with THC, less is more is a pretty good general, framework to take into it, be that an oil or an inhaled preparation or anything. Like, go slow and just feel your way into it. You don't have to have the strongest preparation or the largest dose. If you've taken it, you can't take it back. If you've had a little bit, you can always add more. So slow and steady, and that is a guiding principle in pretty much any medication or anything that you start. As you know, people say start low, go slow, which is a medical very common medical saying, but I think it holds up. We do that with CBD. You can start CBD at a high dose. There are people that do it. I know some people that won't start low. They just go, it's a very benign substance as far as, bad side effects are concerned. It's very safe, and they'll just get somebody onto a high dose quickly. I'm pretty slow. I like to figure out, there are people that respond to really small doses of CBD. And I think if you just go onto a high dose, you can miss it. But if you start low and just gradually creep up and actually see what their requirement is, sometimes you surprise yourself. You have someone on, 2 drops of CBD twice a day, and they come back and say, things are much better. The lowest dose is the best dose, right? For cost, for potential side effects. So that's one thing. What else?
So with the actual build-up of the receptor sites, so there's obviously a certain saturation point, I guess. Is that sort of, and you're building up slowly to get to the saturation point, and then you can, bring it back down again. It's how long are we talking in terms of doses for people once they've achieved, I guess, a little bit of an outcome?
Yeah, so people will know that CBD is a slow game, and you kind of do want to build until you hit critical mass and then kind of maintain it. A big pitfall with using CBD for a lot of people is they take one dose now and then a dose in a week and then a dose in a month, and they don't get any benefit. You've got to really have it twice a day or once a day, quite regularly to build it up, a bit like an antidepressant without the side effects. You want a couple of weeks to get it into the system and then kind of maintain it. Mm-hmm. People will often get good benefit from CBD. Sometimes they become acclimatized to it and they feel like it stopped working, and then often they stop it and then they go, oh gosh, it was working. It's subtle stuff, CBD. It doesn't, hit you in the face or necessarily blow you away. So people can become very comfortable with it. And then once they stop it, they go, actually, oh yeah, my knee pain's worse, my back pain's flared up, my mental health's, not as good as it was. So THC dosing, the biggest pitfall is tolerance. And, there's people use cannabis and THC in different ways, but it's absolutely inevitable with enough dose that you do become immune to it. You do become tolerant when you start with 2 THC receptors, hypothetically, and you bring in THC and it binds to them. As you bring in more and more THC, the body says, hey, we need to produce more receptors. So then there's twice as many receptors. And then as you bring in more, in order to fill those, you have to bring in higher and higher doses. So THC, major caveat is around not overdoing it, and what is the magic amount? It's different for every person. I think THC should be people should be having regular breaks, and using it sporadically. For my mind, there's a lot of people that use THC every day. Is that a bad thing? Not necessarily, but again, dose is key. And this pushes me into territory that I'm not sure I want to talk about too much because it might be a little bit boring, but, dependence and crutches in life. It's very easy for any substance, cannabis, alcohol, anything, to become more of a crutch than a medicine and start to potentially not have a whole host of side effects, but be used in a way that it's not quite doing what you want it to do. It's becoming more of a problem than it is a solution. So dose is key, like you said.
Yeah, reliance, and it makes total sense. Even with the dependency, you can even look at compounds like alcohol or even coffee. You get having certain amounts, and then you'll need more to have the same effect. So I guess it's very similar to that, but in different parts of the body. But obviously with what you're trying to say, and I totally understand this, is that if you're giving, even with medicines that we have here, herbal medicines, if it's forming a part of a support system where you should be making changes externally to make your better habits and lifestyles, you're using that as a reliance or a coping mechanism still, where it's not as healthy as it, you could be making changes elsewhere. So I think that's where the key is that noticing that it's a medicine and it's for use until you have worked out those underlying issues of what has actually been happening to cause pain or to cause whatever is going on.
Yeah. And I mean, to extrapolate that, not to demonize cannabis, like anything can be used as a crutch. I've used meditation at a time in my life as a crutch where it became an escapism, and it was like, life's hard out here and I've got conflict and I don't want to deal with it. I'll go sit in a cave in the Himalayas for 6 hours, or I'll go and hide and get real zen and, kind of convince myself that everything's great, and then go out and 10 minutes later be in the conflict again, because I haven't dealt with the underlying problem. So anything, can be used potentially in a way that may not be treating the root cause.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I see it as, a lot of clients who can't deal with the pain, and again, you can't, I have a particular client in mind that I did send to you. If you're young and you can't deal with the pain that's going on from a physical issue, and it's impacting your mood and your life and your sleep, why not use something that has less side effects than pain medication that makes you feel unwell, which they were reacting. So it's something that really gives people that power back a little bit more, and that coping ability. And it's helping underlying information and support as well, so you're getting a bit of a double benefit. So I guess I say this because a lot of my clients and people that I speak to are still so unsure about cannabis. You know, they're like, well, what's it going to do for me? How is it going to be effective? You know, am I going to get addicted to it? Am I going to be high all the time? No.
Maybe, you know, if it's worth me just addressing those 2 points, which I think might be helpful. One is around addiction, and particularly people of a certain age. You know, there's a lot of conditioning in society, and they heard about the idea about cannabis as a gateway drug, or it's highly addictive. I'd tell people that cannabis is addictive for about 9% of people that use it. And that's what the research seems to suggest, which means it's not, and I use the term addictive lightly, kind of pseudo incorrectly. What I mean is, you know, dependence can form. That means 91% of people or more have no issues with it at all. So ordinarily, if people have good life structures and quality of life is good, meaningful connections, friends, family, employment, the life anchors, you know, it's very unlikely for people to have problems with cannabis. There are people that are in vulnerable places in their life, and, you know, no disrespect to anybody, people have very hard lives and hard stories. And if you are lacking certain supports, you know, employment is a wonderful structure in people's lives. You know, having a passion and a purpose insulates against so many health problems. You know, if you take away employment, if you take away family supports, it can become that one thing. So cannabis is not without the possibility to form dependence for people, both physically and psychologically. I think it's certainly a minority, and often it's in the context of the situational circumstances of that person's life.
Yeah, as so many things are, but it's very, very true. And I think that, you know, that hierarchy of needs is so important for so many people, and that's where, you know, requirement for people having support for knowing that those things are not in balance, you know. And that's what I love about your practice, is that you're not only there to supply them and support them and guide them on cannabis, but also lifestyle factors. So I'd love to dive into that with you. You know, meditation, nutrition, you know, sunshine, like basic human needs, water, you know, what we talk about all the time, but sometimes people just really have no idea.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a great segue. Like, you know, that lifestyle medicine is my jam. That's what I really do. I love cannabis, and I love the healing and therapeutics that are available within it. But I like to talk about majoring in majors rather than majoring in minors, which is a kind of little tag from a wonderful teacher, one of my mentors that's really inspired me. But I talk about the 1% versus the 50%, which is like, there are when we're talking about modifiable risk factors in life, lifestyle changes, there are things that are very much modifiable, and then there are things which are kind of more immutable, you know, things that are more hard and stuck and rigid. But if we are chasing 1%ers without doing the fundamentals, then it's always going to create a problem. You know, if someone is eating poorly, sedentary, consuming, you know, toxins, sleeping poorly, disconnected from community, no purpose or passion in life, and then saying, oh, I'm going to take curcumin for inflammation, it's like getting, you know, a bucket of water and trying to pour it on a bushfire. You know, it doesn't make, we need to be like encouraging people, you know, this is my opinion, but working on the majors and trying to get people to affect change on the big prime movers, the things that are actually going to move the needle. Not to say anything bad about, you know, curcumin or, you know, turmeric, but like, it's a small thing. And lots of exogenous things that we bring into the body, bar food, are small things. I don't expect, you know, Panadol to save to change somebody's life. The things that we want to be going into and the things that move the needle are the fundamentals, which you just touched on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you know, like even cannabis, you know, you can't just use one thing, you know, you can't just, and that's this magic pill sort of you know, mentality with a lot of people. Like, what one thing do I need to have? I'm like, well, there's not one thing that you need to have. You need to have sunshine, you need to have water, you need to do your exercise, you need to do meditation, look after your mind health, you need to talk to your friends. You need to have healthy relationships and healthy boundaries, and then you need to have proper nutrition. You've got to not eat all that crap. Get that out of your body. I'm like, well, that's a bit too hard. Oh yeah, and you got to sleep well. So it's overwhelming. But I guess once that ball gets rolling for people, and it's that the cannabis or whatever it is can sometimes, as long as it's a healthy one, it can be that segue. It can be that instigator into that world to then roll them forward out of that. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, I totally agree, which gives me a bit of a humorous thought about it is a gateway drug. It's a gateway into lifestyle modification. I feel like, I totally agree with you. These things, you might take someone who's really suffering badly with chronic pain and, anxious, depressed, not sleeping, really unhappy with it. And someone is coming and saying, hey, you need to exercise, meditate, do breathing. And the person's like overwhelmed. They're like, I can't do anymore. I'm cognitively saturated and I'm sick of hearing people. I hear that from time to time. And I know that people can be overwhelmed with it. So we can use cannabis medicines or any medicines as an adjunct to get the ball rolling, like you're saying, to create momentum. But if you get that ball rolling down that hill and then you're like, oh, well, I've done what I can and I'm taking cannabis, you're missing the yield. You're missing the fact that exercise is one of the single biggest things for longevity and reducing chronic disease. Eating, in my opinion, a whole food, plant-based, low-fat diet is one of the single biggest things you can do to improve your health. So it's like, don't just stop with cannabis. Don't just stop with the herbs or the things that you're bringing in. It's just part of it.
Absolutely. So from your perspective, David, what are the main things that people need to have in their life daily? Every day, wake up every day. What do we need to be doing to be living our best?
Maybe I can answer that with a story, personal story about, 6 years ago or so, I was working in a tertiary hospital, doctor, very on the way to disease. I didn't have any diagnoses, but I was, I had all the precursors for disease. I was binge drinking multiple days a week. I was living off caffeine, drinking 10 cups a day of, black coffee. I was adrenally fatigued. I could fall asleep at the traffic lights. I could sit bolt upright at night. I was sedentary. I was eating takeaway fast foods. On the weekend, instead of being a young, vital person out hiking and moving my body, I was laying on a daybed watching TV, hungover, eating crappy food, full of preservatives, full of, saturated fat and oils. I was, loads of toxins in my body. Among a whole host of other things, my mental health was all over the place. And I was going to work and recommending and telling people how to live their lives. It's a cosmic joke, like the doctor with the poor health. Yeah. So the things that changed for me, which I now advocate for heavily, are the things that I learned about. So I learned how to manage my sleep. I think if you're not sleeping well, it's very hard to get the underpinnings of good health, not only for mental health, but you're not getting the regeneration that your body needs. So sleep's pivotal. Movement is absolutely essential. We should be moving our bodies every day. We're too sedentary. People say that, sitting is the new smoking. We need to move more. For me, it was cutting toxins, and that was alcohol, that was caffeine. So I'm now alcohol-free for about 5 years. Don't drink coffee or take black tea or any caffeinated beverages. We need to be drinking water. We don't need water is what we are designed to take in, very much like our lungs are designed to take in air predominantly. These are the things that we need. For me, it's meditation and trying to get meditation most days or every day where time permits. Breathing is foundational, and I went through a period about learning about breathing, and I know you've interviewed people about breath work and athletic performance. We should be learning to be conscious with our breath all the time, as much as we can, and also conscious with the way that we're living. So trying to be present. I know that sounds super tacky and it's kind of like a go-to buzzword at the moment, but we're asleep. We spend too much time in this psychosis of dreaming about what the future should be like and trying to rewrite the past, which is gone. nutrition is massive, and I spent a lot of time looking at the research, so I advocate for whole food, plant-based, low fat. What else are the major things? Community is enormous. Isolation, particularly after a certain age, and probably at any age, is as bad as being isolated increases your risk of death. So trying to have community around you, people that you value and love, and so forth. I think love and gratitude is its own staple area. I know I'm just firing things at you right now.
So many things, but even that love and gratitude, if you can't have love and gratitude without being in the present moment. You can obviously dream up gratitude and you can think about it, but to actually feel it 100% fully, you need to be present. And for us, so we're so distracted by so many different things, and I find that that's really hard to explain to people as well, is that we've got so much stimuli, information inputs, and sometimes on my prescription I'll just write, get rid of toxic information. That can be cutting off the news or turning off social media for even a few days. You feel refreshed.
So I tell people to throw away their televisions. I think, it's massive. Getting the right inputs and we talk about inputs as food, inputs as oxygen, water. Mm-hmm. What you feed your mind is probably the most important of all. And it brings me to an amazing point, which is about the brain being an epigenetic modifier. I think about this thing between our ears as being the center of the universe, at least in our own lives. And we can race around trying to externally change everything, trying to control everything, which doesn't work. Or we can learn to understand what's going on between our ears and, being present, but also understanding our thinking and, mindfulness, moving away from thinking about how we're thinking, taking time to understand our trauma and our conditioning and why we do certain things. To me, that's the process of life, is understanding yourself and your brain and why you do things. So if this is rock solid and you're constantly working on it, the other stuff has to fall in line. You can't have good nutrition without having an idea about nutrition. You can't have exercise without creating some information around it and saying, this is why I'm doing this. I'm doing exercise because it helps with appetite, because it helps with bone growth, because it helps with, anti-inflammation or insulin resistance. So information and what we're thinking about in our inputs is absolutely fundamental.
Huge. A lot of people will say this placebo, but I believe that, obviously mind is matter, and then mind is energy. So, your energy, your mind can change how your body is perceiving anything. So your perception of even food, for some of my clients who have eating disorders, they will see that as something horrible. So how is the body then taking that on? And that can be so many different things, like running through the park going, I hate these exercises, this is crap. Of course you're going to hate it, so change your mind. This is amazing. I'm out with the birds. I can see the sunshine. I'm having a great time.
Yeah.
Just changing those perceptions with anything can make a big deal. But then, as you said, it's understanding why we're having those negative thoughts or why we're having those thought patterns that are coming through, because it can be from parents or from people that had traumatized in our early childhood, or teachers, or whatever that is. And it's not actually your thoughts, it's something coming from a pattern from elsewhere. Yes, and that's hard for people to understand, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, this is really one of my jams, the mind and perception. It's, this glass half full, glass half empty. The way that we see the world it's everything. It's literally everything. It has the most immense potential to modify. We can change the way that we see. They say when you change the way you're looking at something, there's a saying, I forget, it doesn't matter. But basically, the way we're looking at something is key, and you can look at something and see it one way. Something that I'm working at the moment is called the last time meditation. So multiple times throughout the day, I when I'm doing a task, it could be mundane, and I think, what if this was the last time I was ever going to do this? And I look at it differently. I could be like washing dishes, and I'm like, it brings me into I feel grateful. I'm like, okay, this is different. My eyes can see the world a different way, like going on holiday and seeing a different town or a different country road, and it's fresh. we're very conditioned with everything that we do. And if you can find little tricks, and that's just a simple hack, is to think about, what if this was the last time I was performing this activity? Wouldn't I be more grateful to the beauty and what's actually unfolding in front of my eyes?
Absolutely. I like to do that also with people. You know, what if this was the last time that I ever saw this person? Which, you know, for most people, this can be quite realistic. You don't know if you're going to see the person next. There's no certainty in anything, is there? So it can really bring you back to, the humble nature of how I want to treat that person, or what to say to that person, and be 100% truly, fully yourself. Otherwise, there is going to be some sort of regret. There would be something that you feel bad for, or that you didn't get to do. Same with just those mundane tasks. It's so beautiful that you can, see beauty in some of those things, or all of those things that you're doing on a daily basis that have to be done anyway.
We take the world for granted, visually, audiologically, everything. There's times I'll just sit there and I'll look at something, whether it's nature or my cats or something, and I'll just be like, there's real beauty in everything that's going around us, should we take the time to look at it. And I guess there's so many reasons in life to be unhappy, and, chronic pain and life stresses and finances and the state of the world and economics and politics, whatever. But there's so many, if you're looking for pain and sorrow, you will find it, because there is an infinite amount of that. If you go out looking for, and I get it, it can be hard. And, I haven't suffered like a lot of people have suffered. But I think even people with chronic pain or various conditions, there's still yield on these activities, including meditation. Someone will say, oh, I've got chronic pain, got cancer, or, chronic back pain. What's meditation going to do? How can you be recommending me meditation? I'm like, well, I get that pain can be severe, and I'm not saying to take anything away from that, but there are things that really work. And, there are many people that have found different ways to frame pain and to put it over there in a box, or to get their mind to condition, not to take it away entirely, but to change the way that they relate to the pain. And I think the same goes for life, changing the way that we're relating to our environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And meditation can change your life in a few days, even in one meditation session. I've been talking to a lot of people on the podcast recently about this, psilocybin, this new legalization, which has come. It's very different, obviously, in Australia and what's happening. For one, my perception on it is fabulous in that it's going to give those who are very in the depths a bit of light. So to show them that this is what happiness could be, or the appreciation for that could be. But from my experience with both meditation and psychedelics, which I have tried, the meditation can give you the same. So that for me is like, whoa, it's huge if you're doing it progressively and you're working through different parts of different areas of what you need to be doing, the awareness of your own brain, the endorphins that you can create from that is still incredible. So that's the power of our body. It's amazing.
I've had profound experiences with meditation, and I found it sort of 6 years ago as well, when started with Vipassana meditation, and then I've kind of progressed in many ways to try different styles. But thinking about an experience in Fremantle in the house I was living at, and I crashed my motorcycle prior to this, and been very lucky to walk away relatively unscathed and alive, and was doing a meditation on my bed in this home. And then I had what I describe as a union experience, where I was being, and it kind of went white light. Perhaps one of the most profound experiences of my life. No drugs, no nothing involved. And I was home. I was like a complete circle for the first time in my life. I'd never felt anything like this before. I didn't have to do anything. Tears just streaming down my face. I was being, is the only way to describe it. And we can have these profound experiences. I didn't go looking for it. I wasn't trying to get it. I think the context of my thinking about my mortality within this meditation, which I wasn't even aware about, I was probably quite on the verge of sleep, and kind of, it just kind of happened. But we have this immense potential for healing and union, reaching a whole state for a period, transcendental experience. And that changed my life, and I've continued to have experiences of different intensity like that. It's immense. My life is different now for having that.
Yeah, it's just beautiful. And to have you in practice and able to, one, walk the talk, and also be able to tell people about this and help them through these lifestyle methods, I think it's just magical. It's just beautiful. So thank you for doing all this work, David. I really, from so many other people I've spoken to who have made contact with you or run into you in some way and have come to see you, they always say so many amazing things that you're just really moving the needle. You're making the change. And I don't just say that, I really do mean it. So thank you.
That's really kind. Look, it's my passion, the same as you, right? Like I love it, and I love that I get to learn and the opportunity to grow and expand and to be able to speak with yourself or do these kind of things. It's amazing. It lights me up. There's a narcissism in what I do. There's a part of me, satisfying my own desires, but there's met with an equal force of altruism, which is I've suffered to various degrees in my life, and I've found things that have helped me extricate myself from suffering: meditation, breathing, nutrition, exercise, the things we're talking about. So I don't give them as lip service. I'm not here to sell people false promises. I'm here to describe what my life has demonstrated and to see whether those things can help other people. So that's what it's about. Same as you. Like I'm guessing you want people to have a better life, to suffer less.
Absolutely. That's really the crux of it. So, I really appreciate you coming on today. Incredible conversation. Where can people find you? Is there anything that you want to, websites or whatever, if they're wanting to reach out, particularly if they're in Australia, to come and get some guidance from cannabis?
Sure. The one thing I would just do is do a quick stroke for my online mastermind program, which I call Mind Body Mastery. If anybody wants to, learn some of these fundamentals that we're talking about, I teach an online mastermind program, which is 10 weeks, which goes through this kind of stuff. It's a lot of hand holding, but it's transforming people's mind and getting them to start to modify their behaviors and reverse and prevent chronic disease. So that's really one of my babies at the moment. From cannabis point of view, I can share my email and people can reach out to me if they want to, or they can find me through the clinic. We can provide the details. The other thing I was just going to say before we touched on, you talked about the mind as matter and as energy. And the thing that popped into my mind was a great book that I've read recently, which is by a woman called Anita Moorjani. The last name is Moortjani. It's the story of a woman who has a near-death experience. I'm not sure if you know the book, Jody. And the book is called Dying to Be Me. I won't spoil it, but it's a great book about the transformation that can occur from someone who was critically ill to have a near-death experience to, in a moment, have a body riddled with disease, with cancer, within an instant disappear and come back from a near-death experience to be fully healthy, as proved on investigations and scans, medical miracles, spontaneous remission type style. So, if anybody's interested in learning about the healing potential that can occur through our minds, that would be a good starting place, I think.
And a lot of people need hope like that. You hear these sorts of things, but you don't really know if they are true. And to read these stories and to understand these lives of the people who have actually gone through this and achieved it, and by medical realms, it is incredible to give people hope that this is a possibility, that it's not just a dreamland or just magic in the air. Yeah.
Right. The other one would be Dr. Joe Dispenza, and you can find him by Googling him, but you can look on his website and see countless testimonials of people speaking into a camera face-to-face, honest, with their integrity, talking about how they've transformed their life through meditation, through transcendental experiences to cure incurable diseases and to change the quality of their life. So I think that's a great inspiration for anybody that has fallen out of the idea that they can heal and really needs some kind of inspiration.
Absolutely. And we'll list those underneath, and we'll also list all the websites and contact points for you, David. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today.
Amazing. Pleasure to be here, and thank you for doing the work that you do and for having me on. It's amazing to be able to just share a little bit of my experience.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Jody. Bye.